Welcome to our presentation today on bottom feeders of the underground, where we will be looking at access brokers in 2022. We are presenting at TLP Clear. If you would like to receive further information, please feel free to reach out to myself or Ashley after this presentation. So this is a little bit about me. My name is Beth and I'm a Senior Intelligence Analyst at Intel 471 from the UK. I work on a variety type of products which range from tactical to strategic whilst working to support customers.
And I'm Ashley, an Intelligence Fusion Specialist here at Intel 471. I conduct tactical targeted analyses for 471's clients and work closely alongside our customer engagement team. In our talk today, Beth and I will be discussing a few things. We'll be starting with the what, going into what initial access brokers or IABs are, some examples of where they operate, and some examples of advertisements they post for accesses. We'll then cover some of Intel 471's research, summarizing the top IABs of 2022 and who they targeted, as well as some suspected links to ransomware. Please note that during this presentation, we are not highlighting these access brokers as being directly linked to specific ransomware groups. This is a review of organizations whose access was offered on underground forums that ransomware groups later breached. It is currently unclear if any of these RAS groups directly purchased these accesses from IABs or if they simply obtained the initial access themselves. Lastly, we'll get into the so what of it all, what we see for 2023, why it matters, and what you and your organization can do to protect yourselves against these actors. So, what is an initial access broker? Well, as you can tell from the title of this presentation, they aren't necessarily the most sophisticated of cybercriminals. But that's not to say they aren't a legitimate threat. They most certainly are. They are opportunistic and non-discriminatory, both in who they target and who they sell to. They scrape up the data from the depths of the underground and sell their accesses to the highest bidder. Overall, Intel 471 identifies an initial access broker to be made up of 4 characteristics. Firstly, as I've mentioned, they are opportunistic. These actors will identify any relevant opportunities to exploit victims that can make them money or provide them with status. This status is also known as their reputation. These actors rely on a strong reputation in the underground so that their listings for sale are taken seriously. Valid offerings also contribute to an actor's reputation. Invalid offerings can negatively impact their reputation, making other actors less likely to purchase from them. And when it comes to potential buyers, IABs try to form long-standing partnerships in order to gain continuous customers and broker bulk deals for larger sums of money. The average offering from an IAB typically ranges from $500 to $2,000 US, but we've also witnessed bulk offerings of credentials be listed for up to $40,000. IABs sell their accesses across many forums in the cybercriminal underground, and on this slide, you'll see 2 examples. The image on the left of the screen is a screenshot of the homepage for the RAMP, also known as the Ransom Anon Marketplace Underground Forum, which is a forum catered to ransomware operators, network intruders, and IABs. The forum was initially launched in July 2021 in response to the prohibition of ransomware-related activity on several of the top cybercrime forums, and it currently has over 300 members. The image on the right of the screen is a screenshot of the underground forum Exploit, which is a long-standing Russian language forum that was started in February 2005. As of today, it has over 77,000 members, consisting of actors ranging from low-level to sophisticated cybercriminals. But in some cases, rather than sell on a forum, occasionally initial accesses are sold in dedicated marketplaces, such as the screenshot you can see here, which is sourced from Twitter. One shop we've seen in 2022 features an English language interface and does not require a registration fee, so it's free to join. Recently, this shop contained over 2,500 compromised RDP servers, over 200 compromised SSH servers, over 12,000 compromised web hosting control panel or cPanel accounts, and over 3,000 websites with uploaded web shells. The shop included multiple filters to choose products from, and items could be checked for validity before purchase. In this case, the shop operator specifically sought to cooperate with IABs on a profit-sharing model to split the earnings 50-50. Another example of such a marketplace for IABs is the recent launch of an invite-only underground store selling compromised network access credentials run by 2 prominent access brokers. The shop's inventory allegedly included more than 10,000 login credentials worldwide. Providing inventory to shops like these is an example of one of those continuous partnership opportunities I mentioned earlier.
So, looking at an advertisement example here, the image on the left, which we have redacted as an offering made on the underground, is an advertising for remote desktop access for a Spanish-based organization. This offering here shows a start price of $200, and each bid will increase by $100 every time someone comments. The word blitz is some underground slang for buy now, which is often significantly higher. In this instance, it's $1,200. We have observed this to be a common buy now price for accesses to an individual organization on the underground. Once another actor comments and nobody else engages after 12 hours, the actor has then won the bid. While the redacted image shows a listing for a single victim, more often than not, IABs list multiple types of access in the same offer. This can be seen on the image on the right, which we've sourced from Twitter, as it's advertising corporate accesses for different regions. This is likely due to the large rise of bulk sales, where IABs are increasingly sourcing their access from malware logs. This offering here has a start price of US $2,000. Both of these offerings here do not state the victims, and this is in order to provide some operational security and not immediately alert the victim, which gives them time to get the sale through and also creating a barrier for law enforcement tracking. Overall, generic listings for VPN access was the most listed access type we observed in 2022, followed by multiple types of access offers in an advertisement. VPNs and remote desktops are being exploited for accesses as their use skyrocketed during the pandemic due to the increased instances of employees working remotely and the now more long-standing general shift towards flexible working. But we would like to add a disclaimer here that inevitably these statistics only paint a partial picture of total IAB activity across the underground in 2022. As often, IABs do not confirm the validity of the access they offer. Many IABs reveal victims in private chats and will often have their accesses in large batches for sale. And victim details are often not available until the IAB is directly contacted by a potential buyer. Going into target overview, the statistics on the graph here is pulled from all Intel 471 reporting collected for 2022. By filtering on geolocation, we can see the IABs impacted regions and countries worldwide. We usually observe North America being the most targeted region. However, with IAB offerings in 2022, we observed it to be Europe with the highest amount of victims, followed by North America, Asia, and then South America. Although the most impacted countries overall was the United States, followed by Germany, Brazil, and France, which we are going to expand on later in this presentation. I do just want to add a little disclaimer here that IAB's activity is often discussed through private chats, and due to the sensitivity of this collection, we have added aliases to these actors' handles throughout this presentation today instead of their underground handles, which they usually operate. We have assigned them as brands of chocolate or candy bars.
So this slide covers some of the top actors of 2022, which is determined by the number of accesses sold. The actor Galaxy sold access to at least 485 unique victims in 2022, making the actor the most impactful IAB of the year. The actor has been active on forums since 2010, and in 2022, Galaxy's advertised access most impacted the US, France, and the UK. The actor primarily targeted educational institutions, which made up nearly half of Galaxy's offers last year. The actor Hershey was the second most prominent IAB in the first, second, and third quarters of 2022. The actor sold access to at least 450 unique victims last year, making Hershey the second most impactful IAB of 2022. The actor has been active since June 2020, and last year primarily targeted the US, Brazil, and France. Similar to Galaxy, Hershey primarily targeted educational institutions, which also made up more than half the actor's offers last year. And Hershey is interesting because their activity occurs on a quarterly cycle, selling large amounts of access at one time and then going dark for several months. Lastly, the actor Lint was one of the top IABs in the second, third, and fourth quarters of 2022 and sold access to at least 190 unique victims, placing them in the top 5 for the year. The actor has been active since June 2021, but significantly expanded their presence on underground forums in 2022. Lint offered access to a wider range of victims than what's typically observed from other IABs, suggesting the actor is highly opportunistic. The countries most impacted by Lint's offerings were the US, France, and Turkey. Similar to the other top IABs, the most targeted industry was education, but Lint also targeted the IT consulting and power and utilities industries. Overall, education is a highly targeted industry for a few reasons. Universities and institutions do not typically have a robust cybersecurity team nor robust cyber infrastructure. On top of this, schools are typically well funded, and the data that they hold is sensitive, such as research data, making them a target that is easy, likely to pay ransoms, and enticing to both financially motivated actors and nation state groups seeking to gain insight into that research intel. Geographically, the United States continues to be affected by a significant amount of cybercrime, creating a substantial number of victims every year, with 2022 being no different. The US has a large attack surface due to its increasingly digitized economy and widespread adoption of technological advancements by a plethora of different sectors and industries. When combined with several highly profitable businesses operating in the region, the US becomes a major target. Similarly, France is one of the largest markets for information and communication technology in the world, which has played a role in the region becoming increasingly vulnerable to cyber threats. France also has a large supply chain and is well connected, making it easier to turn one compromise into many. France recently passed a law requiring companies to report cyber incidents to law enforcement within 72 hours of becoming aware of the breach in order to qualify for insurance reimbursement. More broadly, Europe, including France, is already subject to GDPR fines after breaches, which can also be hefty. These regulations might create an opportunity for threat actors to extort victims into paying quickly and quietly to avoid these reporting mandates due to some short time constraints. And lastly, Brazil, a prime target for many kinds of cybercrime, is also a popular target for initial access brokers. Brazil is routinely targeted due to a variety of factors. Brazilian cybercriminals often target victims in country, both with political and financial motivations. And additionally, Brazil has a well-developed financial sector, but lacks a national data protection authority to enforce data protection laws, while also requiring financial institutions to share their data with third parties, many of whom do not have robust cybersecurity teams. And this slide highlights the top actors of 2022 who are newer to the underground. We wanted to separate these actors out from the top ones of the year because some of them were only active for a very short period of time in 2022, and it's still unclear whether they plan on expanding their offerings within the underground in 2023. Still, the sheer number of accesses provided by these vendors was significant, and they are still very much worth noting. The actor Godiva was the most prominent IAB in the fourth quarter of 2022 and claimed to have tens of thousands of valid credentials. The actor was first observed in the underground in January of last year. The countries Godiva most impacted were the US, Germany, France, Brazil, and Thailand. The actor mostly targeted the education industry, accounting again for almost half of their overall offers. The actor Cadbury was the most active IAB of the third quarter of 2022. And while the actor was first observed in the underground in 2021, they were inactive for almost a year before selling at least 315 unique accesses last summer alone. The countries Cadbury most impacted were Thailand, France, and Indonesia. The actor targeted education, but to a lesser extent than the other top IABs of the year. The actor also targeted national government organizations and the IT consulting industry. And lastly, the actor Nestle sold access to over 140 companies in 2022, with over half their listings for the year being in December. The actor has been seen in the underground since November 2021, but hadn't been observed selling accesses until last year. The actor's most targeted industries were education and government, both national and regional. And the actor's most impacted countries were the US, Turkey, and Brazil. Again, you can see that even amongst the newer IABs, education, the US, France, and Brazil still remain highly targeted.
So a question that often comes up is the relationship between IABs and ransomware groups. Using the data that we gathered in 2022, we were able to dive a little deeper into the relationships between these two groups. At first glance, we wanted to see how active both groups were across the year. As you can see here, the quarterly activity of cybercriminals follow a traditional business model, where the second quarter is the most active quarter of the year. The second quarter is the time of greatest risk to companies, followed by the fourth quarter due to the lack of staffing during the holidays, which can make an organization a prime target for a ransomware attack. The first quarter is often seen as a transition period, as staff members are slowly transitioning back into work after the holidays, but it's still slightly reduced from targeting in the fourth quarter. because Q1 encompasses the unorthodox holidays. The first quarter of 2022 was an exceptional case, though, because it is also marked as the start of the war in Ukraine. At the start of the war, many threat actors shifted focus. A large proportion of the cybercriminals we have observed are Russian-speaking, so it is probable that they have been called up or are supporting Russian state hacktivism. It is likely that in the conclusion of the war, cybercriminals who shifted to hacktivism will move back towards financially motivated cybercrime. Becoming an IAB often lowers the entry barriers to the cyber underground and can increase the chances of working with well-known actors and affiliates. So this graphic here maps out a typical step from an initial access offering to becoming a ransomware victim. The first stage is a vulnerable victim, and this can be identified through sheer opportunity or can be targeted attacks by sector or specific organization. An access broker will obtain initial access to organizations and then offer it for sale on the same underground forums occupied by ransomware affiliates. Affiliates then buy these initial accesses and move laterally until the group is ready to deploy ransomware on the victim's network. From all the ransomware demands we were able to capture in 2022, we identified at least 68 instances where a victim organization was impacted both by an IAB and a ransomware incident. Digging a little deeper into these statistics, we were able to identify that the average time between an IAB listing and then followed by a ransomware incident in 2022 was 79 days. This is fairly consistent with a previous analysis that we conducted in 2021 with a small selection of IABs, where we found the average time between offering and attack was 71 days. The shortest time in 2022 was captured at 13 days, with the longest and also 17 days. The shorter time frame could highlight a lack of security implementations, and the longer time frame likely means that these actors are obtaining a foothold into the organization in order to maintain that access if identified. So overall, in 2022, there were 17 ransomware variants that attacked a victim that was also posted by an IAB. Or from the other side of things, 23 IABs were observed selling access to a company that was also hit by ransomware in 2022. And while the average time between an IAB posting and a ransomware attack was 79 days, overall, this can vary greatly by each ransomware group. As seen on the graph here, it shows Play has a very short turnaround time, whereas Carica has such a long delay. Inevitably, these statistics only paint a partial picture of ransomware activity across the underground in 2022, as often victims are not publicly shamed if they pay ransom or even make it to a blog site. In most cases, these are simply two separate observations about impacting the same victim organization. The examples given in this presentation should be interpreted as potential links and not proven ones. For example, in mid-August, the Hive affiliate program claimed to compromise a UK-based educational service provider. And in July, an IAB offered to sell unauthorized access to the network of the same entity. In early November, the operators of CLOP claimed a compromise of a US-based software provider, and in mid-September, we observed two IABs offering to sell access to the same victim. In September, we identified an actor who claimed to lead a team of network intruders engaged in attacks with an undisclosed ransomware variant, and this actor was observed cooperating with the prolific IAB that we mentioned earlier named Cadbury. In May, a representative of the Everest ransomware team publicly claimed to have an unresolved issue with a specific IAB. We have observed Everest ransomware team victims to preferably be based in Canada and the US, which we've also observed the IAB having a similar preference when making victim offerings. So there is a likely chance that these two did business together. But in fact, looking into entities that were listed in access offerings and suffered a ransomware breach last year, 25% of the victims were hit with a ransomware attack first before initial access was even sold.
Therefore, it should be noted that ransomware operators do not have to rely on external IABs to gain initial access credentials. In some instances, RAS affiliates have gained access to a victim organization through the use of open source port scanning tools or exploiting weak credentials using brute force tools. In the past, Intel 471 has observed numerous alleged Lockbit affiliates showing interest in attacks involving scanning for open RDP ports. The Everest ransom team has also exploited weak RDP credentials for initial access. In other instances, RAS affiliates may mirror IAB TTPs and purchase their own malware logs from information stealers, or simply hire their own internal IABs. The breakup of Conti in early 2022 provided some insights into the operations of larger ransomware groups. In Intel 471's series of reports examining the Conti gang's leaked files, one of the primary leaders of the group allegedly cooperated with a small team of at least 12 IABs, some of whom also reported to other high ranking members of the Conti gang. And Conti is not the only one. Intel 471 has observed the Everest ransom team both recruiting affiliates engaged in compromised corporate network access trade, as well as selling credential accesses on the underground themselves. Intel 471 has also covered leaked documents from the Yan Luang group, which provided insight into their team members, which included providers of malware loaders that the group used to gain their own initial access. Now, let's look ahead into 2023. A big trend we observed in 2022 was the sourcing of accesses from malware logs. The actors Lint and Hershey have been observed purchasing malware logs, and in 2022, Hershey launched a Telegram-based store for selling malware logs themselves. Cadbury, Galaxy, and Godiva have also claimed to source access credentials from undisclosed malware logs. Interestingly, Godiva also claimed to deploy the malware themselves. Often, IABs will turn around and sell large batches of accesses based off the information within these logs, increasing observed instances of posts for hundreds or even thousands of credential accesses available with one purchase. One such example we saw in 2022 offered to sell upwards of 36,000 credentials. This trend implies that the IABs with the highest number of offerings might have similar TTPs to one another and may be potentially sourcing from the same locations, whether that be a seller of logs, an underground shop, or cloud storage. In 2022, Intel 471 observed over 500 occasions of various IABs selling access to the same companies. This very likely implies identical sourcing methods, but could, of course, instead indicate associates, alternative online personas, or it might simply mean that a victim company had more than one account exposed. But overall, these observations highlight the importance of identifying and disrupting actors who operate underground shops for malware logs, such as one actor we observed last year who claimed to operate a private Telegram channel selling over 19 million logs from info stealers. Looking ahead into 2023, it's highly likely that bulk sales of access credentials will continue to increase. Several new IABs will likely emerge in 2023, and they will likely still sell large amounts of accesses sourced from these malware logs. As such, there's a potential for increased duplicative listings across multiple IABs due to these similar sourcing methods. Still, these accesses will almost certainly remain lucrative, as Intel 471 has observed numerous instances of ransomware operators seeking cooperation with IABs, and this is unlikely to stop. However, while yes, typically IABs are understood to be opportunistic threat actors, supplying other threat actors with advertised accesses for sale on forums, just like any type of criminal, there are different levels of sophistication. Some obtain initial access themselves via first-stage malware payloads, and some actively exploit known vulnerabilities. Towards the end of 2022, Intel 471 observed a significant increase in Fortinet-based offers, which was linked to the increase of actor discussions related to the 2022 vulnerability 40684, which is an authentication bypass vulnerability concerning Fortinet. It's likely that this increased targeting of Fortinet will carry into 2023 as well. We've also seen a large surge at the start of this year in ransomware targeting VMware ESXi hypervisor servers worldwide. It's likely these actors used a 2021 vulnerability, 21974, to gain initial access into these systems. And we've seen IABs express interest in using this vulnerability as well, and it's likely that they will attempt to do so this year. In the beginning of this year, we are also seeing a large surge in various malware deployment techniques, such as malicious OneNote files, and a rise in SEO poisoning and malvertising attacks. As other malware actors see success with these methods, it's likely that those more sophisticated IABs like Hershey, or the ones who deploy their own malware rather than purchase logs, such as Godiva, might pivot into using these techniques as well. IABs are willing to pivot to new techniques that work, and to pivot away from techniques that are no longer financially lucrative for them. In 2023, we will almost certainly see IABs shift their TTPs to align with whatever methods gain them the most profitable accesses possible.
So we often get asked, why do we need to care about IABs? And here are 3 reasons why. IAB activity can provide valuable information about the types of threats and attack methods that are currently being used in the cyber underground. This information can be used to improve a company's security posture and better protect against future attacks. IABs often sell access to compromised systems, including those belonging to companies' employees or partners. By monitoring IAB activity, a company can detect when its systems have been compromised and take appropriate action to secure them. And lastly, IABs may use the access they provide to steal sensitive information such as customer data and intellectual property or financial information. By monitoring IAB activity, a company can reduce the risk of a data breach and the damage that it could cause of a company's representation. When it comes to mitigating the issues that IABs pose, we recommend monitoring for access being sold in the underground, not only for your organization, but for other organizations you use as vendors or organizations that you could be affiliated with as third party. When setting up alerting for your company, make sure you have the access type you use, for example, Citrix, along with your sector and industry. As we showed earlier in this talk, often IABs do not necessarily call out the company name specifically, but they do post the industry size and revenue along with access type. Tying into our previous point, minimizing and monitoring third-party access, requiring multi-factor authentication and/or one-time passwords, configuring your system permissions based off users' role bases, routinely updating software and patching vulnerabilities, whilst keeping awareness around vulnerabilities that are being exploited or highly talked about, reducing third-party infrastructure and data storage, and ensuring strong password policies. And this concludes this presentation. Thank you for listening to our talk today.
I think we're going to open it up for questions now. Beth, do you want to go ahead and take the first one?
Yeah, sure. So the first question that we've got is in regards to whether all IABs have the same TTPs or if they do things differently. So this is obviously a hot topic at the moment, and we want to be your voice of reason and truth. So with that in mind, we are currently doing some work internally to decide upon a way to wrap more clarity around the types of accesses and how they are offered. So please watch this space with that one.
Yeah, and it looks like we got another question in regards to Hershey, one of the top IABs of 2022, and just kind of asking about why they go dark. So for that one, Hershey, along with other actors who go dark, could be doing so for a variety of different reasons. It could be to avoid excessive law enforcement attention. It could be the work period they take to find their accesses. So they're not selling on the underground because they're off obtaining accesses, or they could just be using an alternate persona from their main handle, which would make it look like their main handle went dark, but they might still be active under a different alias. So hope that helps.
Yeah, and another one that we've had is how can you prove that ransomware operators are using access brokers to gain network access? So, as we've mentioned throughout this presentation, currently we are unable to identify if they are utilizing these actors. However, we have witnessed certain ransomware groups react to access broker offerings in the underground, so there is potential there that they are working together. And we've just had another one come in which says, what is it meant with malware logs and what value do they provide? Ashley, did you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so this is the data from Info Stealer malware. So, Redline Stealer, Raccoon Stealer, VDAR, any of those kinds of info stealers, and the actual credentials that they get from using this malware. So they might deploy the malware themselves, or on the underground, they sell these logs. Other people that deploy this malware just sell the logs, and the access brokers can potentially buy these logs and kind of scrape through them to find login credentials that are useful to sort of these entry points that we tend to see for initial access brokers. So things like VPN services and RDP services, and they'll scrape them for those login credentials and then turn around and sell just those credentials from those logs to whoever will pay for them. So hope that helps.
Oh, right. Well, that seems like all the questions that we have today. So thank you for taking your time to come into our talk. And if you have any questions, then please reach out to myself or Ashley. And thank you.